Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your patience. Today's going to be great. So, hi, my name is Hannah Stommel, and I'm a third-year law student here at Penn. As one of the co-directors of the Youth Advocacy Project, I am thrilled to welcome you on behalf of our entire team to today's Public Interest Week event, Beyond Legal Needs, the Evolving Framework of Client-Centered Advocacy. The idea for this panel came from a question that has challenged many of us in law school. When the law upholds the systems enacting harm, how can we work within, or at least in proximity to, the law to create transformative spaces that tend toward structural change? The COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated challenges faced by individuals within the criminal legal system, from securing stable employment and safe housing to obtaining affordable childcare and meals, and forced many lawyers to confront the limitations of traditional legal representation in meeting client needs. But many in this work, particularly those most impacted by the oppressive systems that we seek to dismantle, have been aware of the limitations of the law and of lawyers for long before March 2020. Our hope is that you walk away today with ideas on how lawyers can better listen to, learn from, and center the expertise of those in legal spaces who do not occupy the role of attorney and who have direct experiences within the systems we seek to challenge. Within legal spaces, how can we, to quote Law for Black Lives, build the power of the people, not the power of the law? We will have Q&A at the end to round out our discussion, and there are note cards on the end of the whatever those are called, tables. So if you want to write down your questions during the event, just as a way to kind of streamline to keep it organized. Now I just want to say a few words about the panelists, though I will definitely be letting them say most about themselves, as they are the experts on their own lives. So John Lopez is today's moderator. He is a staff attorney with the Youth Sentencing and Reentry Project. In that role, John works with young people charged as adults on their cases and supports the Youth Advocacy Project as our supervising attorney. In addition, John is currently pursuing an MSW at Penn's School of Social Policy and Practice. And prior to joining YSRP, John worked as a trial and mentor attorney with the Defender Association of Philadelphia. John Pace is the Senior Reentry Coordinator with YSRP. In this role, John coordinates efforts to secure the necessary resources to support former juvenile lifers and youth client partners returning to the community from prison, jail, or placement. John's own experience returning to the community after 31 years of incarceration, beginning at age 17, informs his reentry work. Don Jones is a reentry coordinator with YSRP. Along with John Pace, Don works to garner the necessary resources to support individuals returning to the community. In addition to his work with YSRP, Don serves as a member of the Temple University Inside Out Prison Exchange Program's think tank. As a former juvenile lifer himself, Don brings to his work decades of experience assisting men with similar backgrounds to obtain resources to support their reentry. Marcia Hopkins is the Director of Youth Advocacy at the Juvenile Law Center. In her role, Marcia collaborates with youth advocates in JLC's Youth Advocacy Program and community partners around youth justice and child welfare reform. Marcia's social work training shapes how she engages in this critical work. And finally, Chris Henderson is the Executive Director of Amistad Law Project. They are a movement lawyer, a co-founder of Amistad, and a founding member of the Coalition to Abolish Death by Incarceration. In addition, Chris is on the steering committee of Free the Ballot, Incarcerated Voter Family Network, and on the board of directors of Black Youth Project 100. I want to thank all of our panelists, John Lopez, the Toll Public Interest Center, Penn Cary Law School, and our YAP team for making this event possible. I will now turn it over to John.
Nope.
You press the button.
Do I?
Green light comes up.
Holding the button.
I think you just have to press it. No.
Thank you very much. That's blinking though.
I don't know why it's.
Is it being recorded? Do I need a mic?
You do have Zoom, yeah. Give
All
it
right.
a try now.
Oh,
There you go.
It's green.
Yeah.
What's up, y'all? This feels so formal. Like Amy said, I'm John. Thank you very much, Hannah, Gabi, Margaret, Reem, everyone from the app team for putting this together. We'll start with our panelists. We'll just go down the line and give a brief bio, but kind of wanted to dig into what's alive in your work right now. We have your resumes, but like, what's up for you in what you're doing? So I guess we'll start with John, who has the microphone. John, if you could just say like your current position and responsibilities and what brought you into this work.
You want me to begin?
Go.
As you know, was read, I think that was Hannah that read my bio. I work with the Youth Sentencing Reentry Project as the Senior Reentry Coordinator. I come to this work because of my direct experience serving 31 years at the beginning at the age of 17 years old. And one of the things I learned was, I think through the process of going through that experience, was that I didn't want to see other young people have to experience what I experienced. And so the Youth Sentencing Reentry Project provided me that perfect vehicle to be able to do this work. And so, is there anything else? But that's what brings me exactly to this work, and being able to support young people. I think, you know, if there's anything, is how do I support young people in their self-determination?
Thanks, John. Real quick, can you answer if anything's particularly alive for you in your work right now, something that you've been focusing on as of late?
I think probably the thing that I've been focusing on, and that's been probably meaningful to me, is as was said, you know, I served 31 years, and so I was able to navigate that experience. And so we have young people who are incarcerated, serving various time. Some serving 35 years, some serving 14 years, some serving 20 years. And I get the opportunity to be able to go see them and to help them navigate that experience. And that is something that's really, I think I'm very proud of it, and then give meaning to my life, because I was able to create meaning in my life through that experience, and I'm helping them to navigate it. And so that's been something that's been really, and it's probably on my mind now, because I just recently came back from seeing some of the young people.
Thanks, John. To repeat the question for you, Chris, current position and responsibilities, what brought you into this work, and what's alive for you in this work?
Yes, I'm the executive director of Homicide Law Project and our connected C4 Homicide Movement Power, which we just started in April. And so this past election was like our real first election cycle, which was exciting. And you know, mostly the results of the election were in this area, you know, better than they could have been, certainly. We don't have a future Governor Mastriano. Or a future Senator Oz. And then on the Homicide Law Project side of things, one of the main things I've been working on recently is our podcast Move It Forward. I'm the host this season, and we're kind of trying to tell a story of like violence. So each episode kind of is like talking about this like different facet of this larger thing that the media just kind of talks about as like gun violence. So the last episode, episode 4, was really focused on guns, but on like how do we have so many guns on the street right now? What does gun legislation and like regulation look like in this moment? And the episode that will hopefully be coming out next week is really focused on homicides. And so, you know, what does it like actually look like for people who have lost loved ones to homicide, and how does it look for people who have lost, you know, literally dozens of people who they didn't even care about to homicide. Another thing is we have a campaign aimed at the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association, which sort of functions as the lobby of mass incarceration in Pennsylvania. They've done a lot of work to collectively stop legislation that would make our criminal legal system better, a lot of legislation that would give people second chances, that sort of thing. And it's the trade organization of all of the elected DAs in Pennsylvania except for Larry Krasner. And so we're targeting individual DAs in different counties, trying to move them to a point of at least neutrality on second chances, especially for people who are serving life without parole or death by incarceration. And I really hated law school immensely. And thankfully, after law school, I met some folks at the Pennsylvania Institutional Law Project who were also members of Decarcerate PA. And at that moment in time, Decarcerate was planning a march from Philadelphia to Harrisburg to protest prison expansion and for a people's budget. And that's the prison in particular that like we were against was STI Phoenix, which is like an hour from Philly, which a few years ago at this point, people who were in STI graded for removed to STI Phoenix. And like thankfully in that moment I like joined Decarcerate, did the march, and you know, was not trying to be the kind of lawyer who was, you know, just in an office all day. Although I do spend a lot of time in an office now, unfortunately. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Real quick, can you plug the name of the podcast and where we find it?
Move It Forward. It's like on
All the normal ones.
like
Spotify,
places you
Apple.
find podcasts, yes, all of those things. You know, and yeah, if you look on our Instagram, it's in the link tree.
All right, Ike, Don, aka Ike. Email versus what we call him in person. Your current position and responsibilities. What brought you into this work, and what's allowed for you in your work right now? Please.
My name is Don Ike Jones. Work for YSRP, John Pinks and John Lopez. I've been here about 4 months now. So I think I'm newest member there. I started in June, I think. Yeah, like June. So, you know, I did a lot of my life in prison, starting at 13. You know, I was a kid that went to 4 juvenile placements. It was from 13 to 17, I was in juvenile placements. In between those times, I was home 2 months, 3 months, maybe 4 months, right back in. So I fell through the cracks of the system. You know, the system swallowed me up. You know, at 17, I was convicted of first-degree murder and given life without parole in 55 to 104 years, running consecutive to that. So, you know, but while incarcerated, you know, I went to Philadelphia University, as John did. President of NAACP, I did a lot of programming, and I created a lot of programs inside the prison. You know, because I was tired of seeing guys look like me coming down the hall. Every Thursday night, Tuesday nights, new commits come in. They look just like me. Every Tuesday, Thursday, 50, 75, sometimes 100 of them. You know, so my thing inside was trying to create programs that would wake them up so they wouldn't come back. You know, so I was doing that work inside for over 25 years. You know, since I released, I came home to a program I started at Friends Rehabilitation Center doing reentry work. I worked there for a few months, and I've seen all the cracks there in the system as far as reentry went for guys coming home. So we decided to form our own organization, me and my brother. We started doing the work ourselves. You know, and through that work, you know, we in the community, we in the streets, 12 o'clock at night, we out there canvassing, talking to people, trying our best to get guys not to follow in our footsteps. You know, coming inside YSRP, you know, this was like the biggest blessings of my life, you know, I believe. Because I got to work with kids just like me. You know, so meeting these kids who were facing a lot of years in prison, not knowing what that meant, not knowing how to navigate that system. They had an opportunity to talk to them and their parents and their friends and kind of guide them along the way, you know. So it's very meaningful to me. You know, right now, I'm blessed to have one of my client partners who I'm taking on college tours right now. You know, we've been to Swarthmore, Drexel, St. Joe's. He don't want to come to Penn, sadly. You know, so I'm taking him next area down to Howard University. He's at HBCU. So, you know, that's some work that's going on now, man. Just basically trying to trying to guide the young men, in the right direction, through my own experience, and we should start working with different organizations with the elections and things of that nature. I actually had I was meeting with Dr. Oz a couple weeks ago. He had an office. He had an office, the building that we have office in, organization. So I was like, he's in the building. Let me go talk to him. And we talked. He was like, don't record it, please don't record. Just and it was, I mean, I ate him up. I'd killed him in the debate. He was stuttering. So it was crazy. But we laggy laws to say the least. But that's the work right now. Trying to make a difference. Trying to get the the youth in our city to see things a different way. They don't see no future for themselves. They don't see past 21 sometimes or 18. So that's my work right now. Trying to just make a difference.
Okay. And Marcia, your current position, responsibilities, how you came into this work, and what's live for you in your work?
Awesome. Everybody hear me okay? Excuse me. I'm the Director of Youth Advocacy at Juvenile Law Center. One of my favorite things to do is that I get to partner with young people who have lived experience in the child welfare and the justice system to engage in organizing and advocacy efforts in their community to reform the system. And so I've kind of shifted out a little bit. I'm much more in a supervisory role and get to work with our alumni a lot more, but I work with our legal teams, different organizations on different projects. And we've shifted our organization a little bit where we're much more focused on abolition and getting kids out. We do a lot of work in the past that was focused on harm reduction, which is absolutely important. So stopping solitary confinement, reducing sentences for kids, moving kids out of prison. But once you've been doing this for a long time, you also see that people are funneled in due to poverty and all these other things that society won't fix, that often penalizes people, right? Individuals for societal problems. So we're really trying to move forwards of just keeping kids out. What really brings me to this work is that I have lived experience in the child welfare system and generationally have seen how that has affected my family. I also often will share in certain spaces with people that I've been on both sides of the aisle. So I work on criminal justice reform and juvenile justice reform. Both my brothers were murdered in the city. I still believe in criminal justice reform and juvenile justice reform, regardless of the horrific things that our family has faced, just because I really acknowledge and understand the impact of mass incarceration and gun violence and all of the political things that you can go down a rabbit hole about why that stuff exists. So I often share that with people because I think sometimes people don't think you can do both and believe in healing and redemption and making sure that people don't fall through the cracks and experience those things. So that's really why I come into this space. And I'm really happy to be here today with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. All of you touched on, in a different way, your lived experience and people that look like me. And we're here today to talk about client-centered advocacy. So what comes up for me is like, how is that sustainable? But I'm going to keep that in my back pocket for later because we have a bunch of other questions to get through. That's just a question. Let's start with Ike and Chris. What does client-centered advocacy mean to you? And is there a time or a specific experience in your work where this framework has made a difference?
To me, it just means find out what the client needs. It's not about me or what I think the client needs. It's about the client thinks needs for himself or herself. A lot of times in this work, where you're put inside a box, everybody's looked at the same way. Everybody's given the same treatment. When we're individual people, we're different. We're not the same. So for me, with my own personal experience, I was treated the same as everyone else throughout my whole life, never as an individual. So for me, dealing with my client partners is always dealing with them as the person they are. Talking about what do you need, what do you expect, and not pitting what I want for them onto them. It comes down a lot of times just talking to them, not talking at them. As kids, we would talk at a lot and not talk to. So that's how I come to this work, knowing that it's not about me, it's about my client partner. It's not about what I will feel about what he or she wants for himself. So that's how look at.
Along the same lines, like you just referred to your client as client partner. Can you expand on that a little bit?
But this is something actually that I learned for YSRP. You know, we call them client partners because it's more than just a client. We form a relationship. We have partners in this. You know, so if you say a client, it take away from it being personal. It becomes just business. You know, so we say client partners. You know, we make the connection personal. And I get calls all the time from my client mothers. How you doing today? I'm good. What's up with you? We just talk. You know, so that's the relationship we have with client partners. And we work with them and their families. So we try to always keep that out front, that we're not just your average people saying you're my client, you know, you're my client partner because we're partners in this, working together in this.
I mean, yeah, I don't know that I have much to add on after I really broke things down really well. I guess like the only other thing I would say is that like in our prisons in Pennsylvania and across the country, around the world, there are so many people who are like, brilliant, amazing humans who shouldn't be in cages. Not that anyone should be in a cage. And all of that human potential, all of that, you know, there's so much that is possible, that could be possible if those folks were home. One of the first prison visits I went on in Pennsylvania was to visit Robert Slim Holbrook, who I don't know if anybody in here knows him, but he's now the executive director of Abolitionist Law Center. He's also the person who, when he was still inside, named Amistad. And you know, every time I visited him inside, it was like heartbreaking leaving. I was like, why is this person, you know, still here? And so yeah, that's the only thing.
So it sounds what I heard both of you say in different ways is humanizing. That like the system has taken away some of that humanity and client-centered advocacy. That framework means you humanize this person again.
Can I add just an additional thing? I think it's a combination of what both of you have expressed. But I would just simply add that it is about what the clients want. Because oftentimes what happens is attorneys usurp the will of the client, and they think that they know what's best for their client partner. And so what happens is now client-centered is you're focusing on what they want, because that's often lost in this picture. You know exactly what they want. And so that's the unique approach that we take at YSRP. It is about what it is that you want and how could we support you in achieving what it is that you want. And so that's the focus is about what it is that the client partners want. And I think that's, to me, like to sum up exactly what both of them said is, you know, recognizing their humanity and digging deep to find out what happened to them that they found themselves in this unfortunate situation, and how could we support you to achieve what it is that you want in your life.
That's like you're talking about self-determination.
Exactly.
Cool. For John and Marcia, you touched on it. I want to know how you really feel about lawyers, John. Hierarchy and harmful power dynamics are staples of the legal field. Lawyers and law students are centered in advocacy organizations, and like you just said, even in court, clients have very little to say. It's mostly their lawyers or social workers speaking on their behalf. How can lawyers better listen to and learn from and center the expertise of people in these spaces that are not lawyers?
First of all, that's an excellent question. I go to my own personal experience. In my circumstances, you know, my attorney, rather than listening to me and finding out, you know, more about me, just simply came in and said, I want you to plead guilty to second-degree homicide. I didn't know what second-degree meant, and I pled guilty under the pretense that I would only do 10 to 15 years in prison. And once I went to prison, I learned that second degree means life without the possibility of parole. And that was because my attorney didn't get to know me, didn't get to know my family, didn't get to know people who knew me in the community. That could have shed a little bit of light on exactly who John was. And so to me, I think this is an important part of what attorneys should be doing. I think part of it is, I think Ike spoke to it, it is about developing relationships. Because I think once you develop a meaningful relationship with your client partner, you know, they might refer to them as client, but once you develop a meaningful relationship, I think you're going to understand that person a little bit better. And I think that helps you in the advocacy that you will be putting out for that client partner. But I think oftentimes they don't develop that relationship. I think to me, it's what I call is a perfunctory process. They got these cases and it's routine. I'm going to get this case over with. Just simply, I got a case, let me get this and move on to the next case. And so you never get to know who this person really is. And then all of a sudden, this person got all these years in prison, and they never really, their voice and who they are never got to be told. And so I think to me, they need to be developing better relationships so that they can, I think it improves how the advocacy would look once they, you know, got to know the client partners a little bit better. I think that's a key component of why I think the advocacy is the way it is.
I always like this question. I work at a law firm, but I criticize law all the time. And I'm a social worker. I criticize social work. But just to emphasize John's point, absolutely, right? Like, people are human. Like, you should come into this space. Also, when you're representing kids, you should never say words like, no one knows what second degree is. No one knows. Also, when you read like the facts of a case, it makes me think about that, where people are like, oh my God, that kid did aggravated assault. I'm like, you know, there was a fight at school. So you need to break things down. Nobody actually knows anything about your role or your position but you as a lawyer. And it's the same thing in any profession, right? Like, we use language and talk to people as if they know. So one, know that if you're representing a kid, that's a kid. It doesn't actually, it matters what happened or what they did, but not in the context of you talking to them, right? Like, you're still talking to a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old. So you need to incorporate that in your work. Yes, to, you know, doing what they want, talking to them about what that is. I think it is absolutely inhumane when people force kids to take plea deals that are going to dramatically affect the rest of their lives just because you want to get it off your case. Criminal legal work is hard. It takes a long time. It's okay. Do not point your client to something that is going to change their life. And then the other thing that I will just leave y'all with is, I learned this in social work. And I always think about my own experience in the foster care system. Like, we never knew anything what the hell was going on in court until we got reunified. No one ever talked to us. The lawyer never told us what was happening at all. Whatever you learn in school is not actually what's going to happen when you leave, just so you know, right? Like, court is different.
Can you say that again?
Yeah. What you learn in school is not good. I learned that as a social worker, honestly, and deeply has dramatically shaped how I do my work. Also, we are adversaries to our clients naturally because you represent a legal system that has disenfranchised Black and brown people historically and still currently forever. And so you have to come into the space not like, you know, I'm your friend, but you have to come into that space with that deep acknowledgement that is going to affect your work and how people view you, because you represent a system that does not actually deliver justice. And so even if you get your clients lower time, it's not really justice to them. And so I caution people as you go into the field, really think about what justice means for that person and not for you, for your case. Because for those of us who work in this space, we don't actually really think we're achieving justice that much unless we get people out of cages and not get people harsh sentences and all these other things. So I just leave you with that, because when you step into a courtroom with a 10-year-old who's facing adult charges, right, for the rest of their life, that law book and what you know about presenting your case is, if you feel like they're human, it's going to feel dramatically different to you. So I just, I like to leave law classes with that thought. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll go to Ike and Chris for this question. Do you think legal spaces can foster collective healing and community support? And have you seen that? If so, have you seen that? I don't even think I need the second part of that question based on your face, Chris.
I mean, I really try to imagine what that could look like. I would have believed it, but yeah. I feel like I'm like, what is a legal space? I think that. Can you repeat the first part of the question?
Yeah. Do you think legal spaces can foster collective healing and community support? And I welcome you to break it down, like the thought process. I think is what's important.
I think if the intention and like the trajectory is like actually not being a legal space, then like yes. I think the things that we actually need for healing and like transformation are things that when they happen in those contexts, it's kind of like incidental or like a happy accident. Like it's not something that those systems are actually designed to do. Like of all the humans that I know who are doing really amazing things in prison or who have come home from prison and are doing really awesome things, the transformation and like the rehabilitation that they underwent, or just the growing up and life processes of maturation, like those things happened despite the circumstances that they were in, not because of them being locked up for decades. And I think the places where I think healing is most likely and healing is really prioritized are spaces where there's not like legal systems that are interacting with them. So kind of maybe.
I think that it can. For me, my growth and development was because of other men inside the institutions who kind of took us in as juveniles. I heard stories about other parts of the country where juveniles was preyed upon. And when I came through, there wasn't a culture down in Pennsylvania. The older lifers, they kind of looked at us like, damn, kid, you fucked up. Excuse my language, this was in store for you. So what you gonna do? My thing, I played sports, I boxed, and a lot of things out of the institution. And they was like, just don't do that. That's cool. You can't do your life sentence playing sports. Go to school. They had my GED. They was like, further that. Get into college, get organizational work. So do these things that's gonna make you a better person. So for me, I functioned in that chaos. And I was able to come out okay, but not healed. I was definitely not healed in there. Because I suffered harms in the streets from my parents, from my siblings, from just the community. That a place like that couldn't heal. So for me coming home, it was realizing I need help. So I would see a psych, and I still see a psychiatrist. Because I need somebody to help me navigate through my feelings and emotions. So I always tell my client partners and guys come home, period, that see the psych and get mental help is not a bad thing. You can't be in jail all those years and not have some kind of harm from it. It's impossible. So for me, it was my teachers in there. The guys are still teaching me now. I get phone calls every day. We talk. What's going on with you? How you doing? You all right? This is what's going on. The young guy, this is what we're talking about. Or going like this, So I'm always getting advice from my teachers, that's still inside. I always tell people when they say, you're so intelligent, you're doing such great work. Well, you think the students are, but you meet the teacher. Because I'm not creating the proper inside the institutions. Those guys in there, they're scholars, and always put that out there. So you're not gonna heal in there. It's not a place that's built for healing, but you can function and grow in there. You have to find healing somewhere else. It's not gonna happen inside the institutions.
I think it's real interesting, Chris and John, and what you both said about healing in direct contrast to like lawyers being present. And I would posit that that's because our legal system is based on harm, right? Not on healing, on white supremacy, on capitalism, on patriarchy. And we're still working for our clients who are caught up in this system. So is there a role for lawyers in these broader social movements? And if so, like, what is that role? Or what do you think that role should be, given that necessarily the legal training is harmful training, and not just to Chris or to anyone?
I go quickly. My first attorney, when I was going to trial for the murder case, I seen him preliminary hearing in that trial. Nothing in between. No conversations, no talking to my parents, nothing. You know, so I'm like, what you mean you're starting trial? We got to have a conversation. You know, do you know what's going on? Like, I don't have my discovery, I don't have anything. I'm not going to try like that. You know, the judge, unfortunately, like, well, if you don't participate, we have the trial without you. You know, so that was my first experience with that attorney. You know, but going forward, I got resentenced. You know, I had a new attorney. You know, my attorney, that's called one of the best in the city. You know, he was very, for me, communicative. We talked a lot. He went to see my wife, he went to see my family. Everything's going on, he kept me abreast of it every step of the way. You know, so they felt involved in the process. You know, but then there are other guys with the process that didn't have that. You know, so, you know, for the lawyers, I think they hold a lot of power. You hold a lot of power going to that courtroom. But your client's looking at you as the person who's going to help them get the best outcome. You know, and they're looking at you like, what you going to do? You know, so, you know, just going in the courtroom, you know, for a client is daunting. You're sitting here looking at a judge who's sitting above you while the judge your life. Only person got to help you in that courtroom, if you don't know the law yourself, is your attorney. You know, so the attorney is not the kind of attorney who's going to be communicative, going to talk to his client, going to really investigate, you know, going to go the extra mile. He's going to cause a lot of harm. You know, so I don't have no ill will with attorneys. My attorney last one was great, no problem, but I do know some that ain't worth nothing. I mean, you got some that, no. You know, they just, and I see it now in the work we do now. I see some lawyers who don't help their clients at all. I was giving you a case pro bono. I don't want your case, plead out. Period. I'm not going to fight for you. I'm not going to smile for you. Yeah, that's crazy. You know, so, you know, I just think that when the attorneys really understand that my client partner, my client is a person, is a human being, has a family, has feelings, you know, made a mistake maybe, but can overcome the mistake. You'll get more out of that relationship.
And I think like right now we have the systems that we have. We do have this duty, this obligation to do our best in this context to get the best possible outcomes for the people that we're working with. My hope is that we will have prison industrial complex abolition, and that we will have systems that actually are humanizing and care about all of us just as people and the things that we need and the things that, you know, actually are going to help us thrive. And then I think, you know, then I think we really don't need lawyers. But right now, I do think that there's like this work that, you know, unfortunately we've set up the system where like we like really can't do it. Like I know so many people who, you know, are excellent jailhouse lawyers and have done so much legal work and know so much, but, you know, once they get to a courtroom, they're reliant on their lawyer to actually be the one to like make those arguments. It doesn't matter how much work they've done up until that point, like they can't do that part. And for some people it's meant that they are locked up, they're serving more time than they should be, than they should ever have been, because they had lawyers who didn't really care about them.
Yeah, so I obviously come from this, this quest and this perspective from, a number of roles. One of them, while incarcerated, having a bad lawyer. But also, while litigating myself, one of the things I did, I studied law myself while incarcerated out of necessity to try to work to get my guilty plea overturned. And so I used to do legal work, and I remember a time I filed a petition in the court, and the state court denied me, and then I eventually went to go to the federal court. I filed a federal petition, and I was used to being denied all the time, and I got a judge to say, granted my petition, and then put attorneys on my case, attorneys from the federal defender's office, and I had two wonderful lawyers that recognized my humanity. And actually my case made it all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. Ultimately got denied, but it made it to the U.S. Supreme Court. And so I remember a time I used to argue with guys. I used to take this class called Inside Out, where we used to get together with students from outside and us and inside, and we would engage in conversation. And I remember one of the guys inside, we was talking about lawyers, and he was talking, they all scums. And so I remember that time, and I disagreed because I understood that sometimes there are lawyers that have, I think, good intentions, but because of sometimes these overloaded cases, they may not put their best foot forth at times. And so I disagreed with them at the time. And so one of the things, the question I'm getting to the core question that you asked, does the lawyers have a role? I think they can play a role, but I think it is contingent on reimagining what justice looks like. Because I think that if you look at it, and I think we see it today with Larry Krasner, I think he has a different perspective about justice, but you see all of the pushback. Because there are people who've been accustomed to doing things a certain way for a long time. And so he's upset that system. And so what happens is, because I know we have a lot of potential lawyers in the future, there's going to be a particular way, going to Marcia's point, there's going to be a particular way you're going to be trained to be able to practice law. But I think that there's other ways. And I think it's good to be introduced to other ways, because I think a lot of lawyers today, I think, need to be introduced to at least that concept of what is justice. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have, because I think that a lot of them just go along with the process, and they really don't question what this process, the harms of this process that is taking place.
I'll be very quick because I know
Take your time.
I think there's a lot that lawyers can do. One, just as a social worker, the reason why I left direct practice is because I realized how much the law was implicating my young people that I was working with in the housing realm. And I was like, man, people really didn't know what the housing laws are, because even I need to know what they are, because they were directly affecting the young people that I was working with. So one, I think lawyers have an obligation to literally teach people about the law and all the implications. Just generally on folks, because people don't actually understand, most of the general public don't understand how laws work, how they're made, what happens, who's in the position of power to create them. So I think that everybody in the legal field has an obligation to do that. I agree, with all of my colleagues, what they said here. I also agree at some point we all kind of need to work ourselves out of a job. I think people get really worried when we say that. As a social worker, I really hope I don't have to do this for the rest of my life. I really would like to be on the beach and just be an author. I think all of you should strive for that at some point, because it means hopefully we did our jobs and we can live on the beach. But I say that, jokingly, but for real, that our salaries are on the backs of people who make up the system. So when you think about justice, you have to kind of be thinking about it in a very critical way. And I'm going to say something that may not be, popular opinion. I think we have to be real about what role you play and how you contribute and what justice is, depending where. Some of you will be DAs. I'm going to be honest, I believe that you can do some good things as a DA, but the reality is your job is to represent the state. You are in a very specific position. It's just like when you work with folks who may be good people who work for the Department of Human Services or for DOJ. You are representing an institution, and you have to carry out their laws and their policies in a way that is dramatically harmful to people. And so Doesn't mean you can't do good, but it does mean that you will be engaging in work on behalf of your employer. And I think sometimes we need to be real. I don't believe that DAs can fully be ever progressive because they are representing a different entity that is purposeful. And so you just have to think about that if you're in that space. Okay? Not saying don't do that. Not saying you won't do good things. But I just say that we have to think about who we represent, who we're employed by, and what we're meant to carry out to do. Sometimes that doesn't always align with your own goals for justice, and that's just real. So.
Thank you for that. We have about five minutes left before we get to the audience questions. I want to ask you all about sustainability. Is that cool? This isn't a question we prepped. Everyone spoke to having a lived experience that connected you to this work, to centering your clients and client partners, to meeting people where they are and humanizing them. That's super heavy. It's just difficult to do. There is an emotional toll that comes with that. How do you reconcile how heavy this work can be with how necessary it feels, and also the fact that like you're a person with your own needs that have to get met?
I'll be very quick because y'all, I'm literally in this spot right now. It's just hard. And I'm going to flip my response a little bit. One thing that I wish that people I work with or institutions know that, like, sure, I do great work. At the end of the day, I have Black roots, I have Native roots. My family has grown up in this system. I watch Black kids from my community die every day. Half of my cousins were killed due to gun violence. So when I come into this space, I am still myself a human being. But often people miss our own humanity and are like, oh, y'all are just supposed to like be heroes and do all this stuff and like constantly do this. And I walk into a space and I'm like, I actually need to go cry because a child died last night who's Black, who looks like me, and I'm supposed to get on this podium and tell y'all how can we save their lives. And I do think that people forget that I am a person, and I have to pick myself up every day and stand alongside my young people and fight for the things that are literally killing us and disenfranchising us every day. And we're not asked like how we're doing. And so I just leave that as something that I'm trying to grapple with myself, and that at the end of the day, I have to care for myself and do that better than anybody else.
For me, it's a fight not to be desensitized to what's going on, because it happens so much and so often. So they report about a kid getting killed, it's like there's another life gone, and the story disappears. So we have to always find a way not to become too accustomed to it. I think every murder should be outraged. Every murder should be a strong presence. I believe that every murder should be like a cop get killed. When a cop get killed, the whole force come together, and they converge, to find justice in that. And I think if that's the same response for every murder, we see a lot of that stuff stop. So I'm just always thinking about my nephews. Thinking about the kids in my family. How I feel if something happened to them. So I keep that in my mind at all times. So when I'm dealing with my client partners, I'm dealing with, grieving families who just lost a loved one. I can always, sympathize with them. Sometimes people get into the mindset, they become just what I do. A kid got to take a deal for 25 years. It's a hard pill to swallow, but it's better than a life sentence. It's crazy that, they have to think like that. But we're in a system where sometimes that's what happens. So how do I look this kid in the face? Like, you gotta do 25 years. You're 15 years old. So I know exactly what you're about to go through. So I've been through it. So I think for me, I go to the gym, talk to my psychiatrist. We got a group, we play basketball every Sunday morning. We all get together, play ball. Just let off some steam and stress, from the week that we had. So it's finding ways to decompress. You know, because this work is taking a toll on you. You know, it take a deep toll on you. You know, so when you go home at night, this work goes with you. They say when you work at work, you can't take this work home with you. If you care about the work that you do, it's going to stay with you. You know, so I'm always thinking about my clients, partners, all the time. You know, I'm always thinking about what they're going through now. You know, so, you know, they always say, we know we're at the prisons. Yep, I'm always up there. Because it's important for me to be there for them whenever they need me. Because I think just keeping that up front, like keep knowing you got to have some space for yourself in that, though. You know, not that you're forgetting the client partners, not you forgetting, you know, the commitment you have to them, but the commitment to yourself also has to come into play. So I find time, you know, just for me. You know, like me and my brother, my wife would say, "When you go on a night ride?" Yep. My bike, I just ride. You know, because I love riding bikes also. So, you know, that's my time. I'm just thinking, that's my peace, that's my decompressing.
I'm a really pessimistic person, which I think helps in this way. It's like I don't think that like next year, next week, next decade, we're gonna like have all this figured out and then, you know, everything's gonna be cool. I'm like, no, this is probably going to take my lifetime, probably the lifetime of my children, and maybe their children. Like, then maybe we'll be in a place that's like significantly better than we are now. And so like knowing that it's gonna take a long time, I think also helps me like, you know, remember that I need to do things like knit and watch Hallmark Christmas movies. And like other things that just like, you know, help feed me as a human. Miriam Kaba says hope is a discipline. And like I do think that there's like a lot of moments of, you know, really hard, difficult, terrible things that happen. Was it last month I think it was last month, the Board of Pardons, because it was, you know, leading up to the election, they granted almost no public hearings for people who are serving without parole. And the commutation process is the only way that people serving life without parole in Pennsylvania can come home. And, you know, there were multiple people I knew who were going up and we were like, you know, this will be the last moment with this Board of Pardons, with Attorney General Josh Shapiro and Lieutenant Governor Fetterman on the board, who like we know are both frequent yes votes and like the, you know, really try and like champion people who are serving life without parole to come home. Like they just denied almost everyone, and they didn't look at any reconsiderations. It was like this really devastating moment. But then there are also moments like, you know, earlier this year, Felix Rolado came home, who spent, you know, like 25 years inside, and he works at the Youth Art and Self-Empowerment Project, which Amistad shares space with, like we share office space. And so I get to see him like basically every day at work, and that's great. Like literally, as someone who was convicted of first-degree murder, as someone who is only 45, it's like people didn't think that he was going to be able to go home through the Board of Pardons. And so it's, you know, it's really beautiful that I just get to like, you know, talk to him about the Eagles every day.
Quick plugs for the Youth Arts and Self-Empowerment Program. Yes, Marianne Kaba. We do this until we free us. And thanks for mentioning it twice. Therapy. Everyone go to therapy.
Yeah. So my response to this is like a little nuance, but I'm still journeying in this area. And I think I'll say this because inside, a part of our ability to survive is that we have to deal with a lot. And you build up, you know, I think the word resilience is overly used, so I'm gonna say we build up a certain level of resistance that allows us to be able to cope with circumstances, you know, of serving 20, 30, 40, 50 years in prison. And so, but one of the things that many of us who've been able to make it out and those who are still in, is that we continue to fight. And so we develop those habits. And so that's one of the things as I come out here and I do the work, many of those habits that I develop in there, they're transferred out there. And so you don't think about, do I need to take a rest? You don't think about it. But there's a reality that there can be that inability to be sustained because of, the impact of the work that you do. I asked someone a question, like I said, think about this, or someone said to me, think about this. He said, think about all that you've been through, serving 31 years, beginning at the age of 17, and now you're taking on other people's, issues. They said that's like double trauma that you're going through, and I never thought of it in that way. And so it's something that I am like journeying on and exploring about how do I take care of myself. And I'm thankful that I have an organization that is very thoughtful of this as well, that creates that space for us to be able to take care of ourselves. And one of the things I was grateful for earlier this year, we had what we call, I think it was coming out last year, early this year, vicarious trauma training, just thinking about how trauma can be transferred. And so I'm constantly journeying and thinking about ways that I could take care of myself. So hopefully I'll be able to ride a bike like Ike one day.
Thank you all so much for sharing that. It's such a deep and personal thing, especially for people who have been in the work as long as y'all have. So I really appreciate your vulnerability today. We have a couple minutes left and a couple questions. One of these is very long. I don't know who wrote that. I'm going to read the shorter one. I got to start with that. My question is about how we think about caring for and affirming the humanity of client partners who are in prison or in jail without legitimizing the system. By that, I mean I think people should be treated humanely, have access to education, and should have opportunities while incarcerated. But my worry is that people who are pro-incarceration will use that to show that jail is this great transformative space where people are being healed, which I don't think is true, nor is it a long-term sustainable solution. How do you all think about that?
I would say this, I get that question a lot. Like people, they look at me, because, while incarcerated, I was very active and done a lot of things. And they look at me and they say, well, it done a great deal for you. Like, as if this is a wonderful place for people to be going. And I say, I think to Chris' point, I did all these things despite, my circumstance, because they didn't encourage these things. If anything, it was all nothing but their focus was about treating me inhumane. But I think there was a resistance on my part that I was just talking about, that I wanted to create meaning out of my life. I wanted to resist being dehumanized. And I think until you experience it, you fight against that every single day in prison. You fight for your humanity because they do everything to dehumanize you. And so just imagine that, and just, I guess that's a part of that equation that someone who would make that or believe that don't really understand because they haven't gone through that experience. And so, yes, I can see people assuming that prison, I think this is one of the things, I've been fortunate to be a part of what we call the Intergenerational Healing Circle that we have at YSRP. It is a circle where men who served a significant amount of time, such as life, and those young people that we work with that's had some level of contact with the system, where we explore trauma together and try to build power through that experience and not allow that trauma to be something that deters us from continuing to move forward. One of the things that in that conversation we explored was why living in many of the areas that many of us live in, that we don't have that space to be able to be reflective about who we are as individuals, who we want to be in life. That's what seems to be the case in many inner cities. And so oftentimes you need space. So one of the things we did, we were able to go out to, we wanted to do a retreat, but we were able to go to John Hines Wildlife Refuge just to be able to walk together with each other out in that space, to be reflective. But and that's unfortunately that's what happens somewhat when you go to prison. That you're taken out of that constant commotion that exists in the inner cities, and then you begin to reflect. But it's not. I don't think that it was intended though. I think it's just an opportunity for you to be reflective about who you want to be in life. And so I wouldn't say that it's prison per se. I think it's just despite the circumstances that we find ways to think about and be reflective about who we want to be in life.
I think of like improving prison conditions as harm reduction, and so it's not the thing that we ultimately want, which is abolition, and for there not to be people in prison. But like the reality is that right now there are in Pennsylvania tens of thousands of people who are locked up, many who are serving life without parole, and don't have at this moment an actual pathway to come home. And so like for those people, it's like, yeah, I do want there to be more programming. I do want there to be like better healthcare access and educational opportunities and programming, so that they're not just stuck in a cell all day or doing other like menial tasks. Like I want people to actually have something that's going to be somewhat life-giving, even in like this context of this like really terrible system.
Non-reform is reform.
Just real quick, I always hear people say that people take your humanity. I don't believe that. Nobody can take my humanity from me. I was inside circle all the time. You treat me inhumanely, you're getting with your humanity, not mine. So I'm not giving it to you. That's something I always tell people. Your humanity is something that nobody can take from you, unless you give it to them. You treat me like an animal, you're taking it for your humanity, not mine. So I always kept that in mind while I was inside. So no matter how they treated me, my humanity stayed intact. They were just, all they were doing was take away from their own humanity.
All the things that y'all said, and I think too, it's the difference with uplifting the system and the institution as a whole versus the things that individual people do. Because I get this question all the time when it comes to kids, like, well, isn't it like saving them? And I'm like, no, they're in harsh conditions. No one wants to be in prison. They're in a box, they're in a cage. It's not appropriate, it's not rehabilitative. There was a person there who provided support, and there was some harm reduction like services and supports. The institution itself is there intently to cause harm. It doesn't do those things. And so I encourage you to separate two, right? When people are like, oh, so that means that prison like rehabilitated them. No, it's not. They contracted with a company that does really great organizing work or workshops and provided people quality education.